The times that we grow up in and the effect that they have on us and how we see life definitely affects how we interact with other people, our expectations of them and of ourselves. So, our generational differences definitely affect our communication. When I was a senior in high school, I had my first real job, and I had to punch in and out on a time clock. Well, one Friday afternoon, my dad was picking me up from my afternoon job that day, and I punched out and I jumped in the car and I said, "Well, I was so glad to get out of there today. I punched out a minute early." Well, my dad, who didn't usually have a temper, said, "Don't you ever punch out early." This really surprised me. Let's see, as we go through the generational differences, how his view of things might have impacted his attitude toward punching out a minute early, whereas I didn't think it was a big deal. Here's a quote that I want to read to you. "The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love talk in place of exercise. Children are now tyrants in their homes. They no longer respect their elders. They contradict their parents, are loud with company, gobble down food at the table, don't stand up straight, and talk back to their teachers." This quote is attributed to Socrates, a renowned Greek philosopher around the year 400 BC. Now, I did change the words in it somewhat because it was very dated language, and it would have given it away immediately that this was from years ago. But doesn't this quote sound like something you've heard older people talk about as far as the younger generation? So this has been going on for centuries, that the generations have different ways of seeing things. We are living in a time right now that we haven't lived through before as far as the people of different ages in the workplace. And a lot of what I talk about in this presentation is going to be focused on the workplace, because this is the first time in our American history that we can work somewhere and there will be such an age difference in the people working together. Older people are staying in the workforce longer. They're not necessarily retiring at traditional retirement ages. And then younger people, some of them are starting to work as early as 14, 15, as I'm sure some of you in this class can identify with. So there's a broad age difference in many times when you're on a job. What do you think you know about these different generations of people? And even though different social scientists might have slightly different names for these groups, I'm using these here because these are pretty well recognized as what we use for the generations. Gen Zers are roughly, now these are roughly 7 years to 22 years old. Millennials are about 23 to 38 right now. Gen Xers are 39 to about 54 right now. Baby boomers, 55 to 73. And the traditionals are those people who are about 74 years old and older right now. So think about, what do you think you know about these people? If you have someone in one of these age groups in your life, have they ever done something or said something that you just don't really understand how they got to that point, how they understand it that way, or why they're saying that? It may have something to do with their generation and the times they grew up in. Our objective in this particular lesson is merely to recognize how our generational enculturation and influences might determine our attitudes and behaviors. Let's look at the oldest group first, the traditionalists. These are the people who were born before 1945. Now, their core values, they were discipline. Discipline was the right way to be at that time. There was a lot of conformity, as far as there was a right way and a wrong way to do things. Their life outlook is very practical. I mean, after all, they were very close to having survived. If they didn't, their parents certainly did, or older brothers and sisters, the Great Depression, when there was a time you didn't throw anything out if you could use it or someone could use it. And World War II, also a time when we had to conserve and be very disciplined. Their life outlook is practical. The family at this time, for these people, the family was nuclear. Mom, dad, kids, grandparents, etc., etc. Male and female roles were very clear. What was expected of the man was what was expected of the woman. Leadership on the job, well, you respect your boss, respectful of authoritarianism. There is a certain hierarchy on the job. There are the bosses and the people under them, and the boss makes the rules. You be obedient. Rewards on the job, well, you don't expect rewards other than your paycheck. A job well done is its own reward. Feedback on the job, no news is good news. As long as the boss isn't on your back, it's good. Career path for these people, job changing has a stigma. You don't want to change jobs. I mean, once you get a good job, you're expected to stay there. Why not? Stick it out until retirement. That was a big career goal for many people. Stay with the job and look forward to retirement. The baby boomers. In many cases, the baby boomers were the children of the traditionalists. These people today are about 55 to 73 years old. Now, let me tell you, the traditionalists had it really rough. They might have lived through the Depression, World War II. When they really got to a point after World War II, when they had money or a little money and they had some privileges, they shared them with their children. They wanted their children, the baby boomers, to have a much better and probably an easier life than they did. So the baby boomers were optimistic. They liked to be involved. They were competitive. The baby boomers were the hippie generation. The baby boomers also lived through the idea that countries had nuclear weapons, and it was possible that we could annihilate humanity in a matter of minutes. So that did affect them. Although with the civil rights movement was beginning to be recognized, that was something to look forward to. Changes were coming that were going to make life better for people, hopefully. The moon landing was a big, exciting deal. So their life outlook was fairly optimistic, but they were a competitive group and they like to be involved with things. Now the family's starting to change. The family is starting to, whereas the traditionalists saw something like divorce as, oh, that's terrible. Don't ever talk about divorce. If someone's divorced, they have a black mark against them. Well, things are getting a little more open with the baby boomers. They're finding that there is life after something like a divorce. Sometimes people remarry, blend families. That's starting to be seen as just a fact of life. Leadership on the job, we expect a little more teamwork. We expect to be able to question authority. Remember, this is the make love, not war. We're all in this together, like hippie generation. So questioning authority. I mean, if Martin Luther King can question authority, I can too. Definitely question authority. Rewards for the job, money and recognition. Feedback on the job, I expect an annual review once a year. Career path, well, even though job changing might put you behind, it's something that sometimes you just have to do. And their career goals of this generation, interestingly enough, a number of these people ended up being workaholics. They liked the fulfillment of a career, and they did end up being workaholics because they are competitive.